titles
Right.
focus on a better talk.
モナワールドの強さは分かってもらえたでしょうか。進化が見せれたかなと思ってます。そろそろベルトを絡みたいので、これからもモナワールドよろしくお願いします。ありがとうございました。
If you saw Mona Kimura walking down the street, you'd probably think she was a model, maybe an influencer, maybe a college student. You definitely wouldn't think she was one of the most violent fighters in combat sports.
どういう試合にしていきたいとかありますか？
打破です。打破。
打破。
はい。
And that's exactly why her opponents keep making the same mistake. Before we begin, I want your honest answer. Is Mona Kimura the most dangerous striker in women's kickboxing right now? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy fight stories and rising stars in combat sports, subscribe now, because today's story might completely change the way you see Mona Kimura.
どういう試合にしていきたいとかありますか？
打破です。打破。
打破。
はい。
The strange thing about Mona isn't how hard she hits, it's how harmless she looks before she does it. The smile, the pink gloves, the friendly personality.
何の打破ですか？
もういろんな意味を含めて打破するんです。
自分の体的に。
はい。もう自分に勝たなきゃ試合でも勝てないし。
Everything about her tells you she's harmless, until the fight starts.
木村選手。
そうですね。前蹴りが鋭く伸びてきます。蹴りというのはどういうふうにご覧になってますか？さあ、前蹴りがなかなか、前蹴り鋭く伸びてきます。
Then suddenly opponents are bleeding, referees are stepping in, and some fighters end up needing medical attention after sharing a ring with her. One opponent would eventually leave a fight wondering whether she needed surgery. Another would spend rounds trapped inside a nightmare she couldn't escape. And the most surprising part? Mona often shows more concern for her opponents after the fight than she does while dismantling them inside the ring. So how does someone who looks this innocent create so much destruction? And why are more and more fighters learning the answer the hard way? Let's find out.
倒すので応援お願いします。モナワールド。
If you saw Mona Kimura walking down the street, you'd probably think she was a model, maybe an influencer, maybe a college student. You definitely wouldn't think she was one of the most violent fighters in combat sports. And that's exactly why her opponents keep making the same mistake. Before we begin, I want your honest answer. Is Mona Kimura the most dangerous striker in women's kickboxing right now? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy fight stories and rising stars in combat sports, subscribe now, because today's story might completely change the way you see Mona Kimura. The strange thing about Mona isn't how hard she hits, it's how harmless she looks before she does it. The smile, the pink gloves, the friendly personality. Everything about her tells you she's harmless, until the fight starts. Then suddenly opponents are bleeding, referees are stepping in, and some fighters end up needing medical attention after sharing a ring with her. One opponent would eventually leave a fight wondering whether she needed surgery. Another would spend rounds trapped inside a nightmare she couldn't escape. And the most surprising part? Mona often shows more concern for her opponents after the fight than she does while dismantling them inside the ring. So how does someone who looks this innocent create so much destruction? And why are more and more fighters learning the answer the hard way? Let's find out. Most people know Mona Kimura for one thing, the side kick. The clip goes viral, the views explode. People watch her repeatedly stop opponents from moving forward. And eventually the internet reaches the same conclusion. That's her entire game. But that conclusion couldn't be more wrong, because the side kick isn't the real weapon, it's the setup. Think about what happens when an opponent spends an entire fight worrying about one strike. They stop thinking clearly. Every step becomes hesitant. Every attack becomes slower. Every decision becomes more difficult.
which were
That's exactly what Mona wants. The kick controls distance. The kick controls rhythm. The kick controls fear. And once fear enters the equation, everything else becomes easier. Opponents stop fighting naturally. They start reacting. And fighters who react instead of acting eventually make mistakes. That's when Mona begins taking over. The audience notices the kick. Mona notices the reactions. And reactions are what she's really hunting. Because while everyone focuses on her legs, something even more dangerous is quietly being prepared. Something that has left opponents bloodied. Something that has completely changed fights in a matter of seconds. Because the most devastating part of Mona Kimura's game isn't her kicking, it's what comes immediately after. This is where casual fans usually misunderstand Mona Kimura. They think she's a kicker. In reality, she's a complete striker, and her boxing might actually be more dangerous than her kicks. Watch her fights carefully. Whenever opponents become obsessed with defending the side kick, the punches start landing. The straight left, the counters, the combinations, the accuracy, everything suddenly begins connecting, and that's when the damage starts accumulating. Fast, one punch doesn't seem devastating, neither does the second, or the third, but Mona rarely wastes strikes. Every punch serves a purpose. Every combination creates another opening. Every exchange slowly breaks resistance. That's why opponents often look completely different by the end of a fight. The physical damage is obvious, but the mental damage is even worse, because they realize they're losing every exchange. They're losing every adjustment. They're losing every attempt to solve the puzzle, and eventually frustration takes over. One fighter who learned this lesson the hard way was Satoko Ozawa. By the summer of 2025, Mona had already become one of the fastest rising names in Japanese kickboxing. Ozawa knew exactly who she was facing. She knew about the hype. She knew about the viral clips. She knew about the growing fanbase. And she wasn't impressed. In fact, she seemed determined to prove a point. During the face-offs, she refused to show respect, refused to engage, refused even the smallest gesture of sportsmanship. The message was clear. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't interested in Mona's growing reputation. And she certainly wasn't interested in being friendly. At least that's how it looked before the fight. Because once the bell rang, everything changed. And what happened next became one of the clearest examples of why Mona Kimura is so dangerous.
進化が見せれたかなと思ってます。そろそろベルト絡みたいので、これからもモナワールドよろしくお願いします。ありがとうございました。
From the opening moments, Mona looked different, focused, aggressive, locked in. Most people expected endless kicking. Instead, Mona immediately started attacking with her boxing. The straight left landed repeatedly, clean, sharp, accurate. Ozawa looked confused, like she had prepared for one fighter and encountered someone completely different. Every attempt to establish rhythm failed. Every adjustment created new problems. And the punishment kept building, round after round, exchange after exchange. The damage became impossible to ignore. Ozawa's face began showing the effects. The referee watched closely. The crowd sensed what was happening, and Mona never slowed down. By the second round, the fight had transformed into survival. At one point, the referee actually stopped the action, not to punish Mona, to give Ozawa a chance to walk away, a chance to avoid further punishment, a chance to end the nightmare. To her credit, Ozawa refused. She continued, but continuing came at a cost, because Mona immediately resumed control. The punches kept landing, the pressure kept building, the damage kept accumulating, until finally the referee had seen enough. The fight was stopped. Ozawa had been completely broken down, not by one spectacular knockout, not by one lucky shot, but by relentless precision. The kind of precision that slowly removes every answer an opponent has. And the most shocking part happened after the fight, because what Mona did next wasn't what people expected.
深いちょっと深い手術です
試合より怖いよ。うわすごい、まさにこれじゃゾンビじゃん。大丈夫だと思うけど縫うのが嫌です。怖いです。
でも練習とかもまたお願いします。
私こういうタイプがすごい苦手なので。
あ、そうです。私も逆にですけど。
させていただけたら怖いです。
あ、もう試合は自分に100点満点をあげたいかなって思ってます。もうベルト取りたいなって感じなので、いち早くキラキラしたベルトをいただきたいです。
どんどん試合はねやるでしょうし、まだちょっとタイトルは早いのかね、本人はもうちょっと先って思ってるかもしれないけど、やっぱりただのねホープがベテランに勝った試合っていうんじゃなくて、やっぱり強さ見てたから木村っていうのはやっぱ強いです。
Most fighters celebrate after a dominant victory. Some call out opponents. Some demand title shots. Some enjoy the spotlight. Mona did something different. Later, she went to check on Ozawa, the same opponent she had just dismantled, the same opponent she had just overwhelmed, the same opponent who had shown her little respect before the fight. Mona wanted to know if she was okay. She acknowledged her toughness. She showed respect. And in that moment, the contrast became impossible to ignore. Inside the ring, Mona looked ruthless. Outside the ring, she looked compassionate. It's one of the strangest combinations in combat sports. Extreme violence paired with genuine humility. And maybe that's the reason so many people struggle to understand her. Because most fans expect fighters to be one thing. Mona is two completely different people. The smiling girl from social media, and the nightmare standing across the ring. But while Mona was showing respect backstage, her career was already moving forward. The victory over Ozawa wasn't just another win. It was another statement. A reminder that she wasn't simply a viral sensation. She was becoming something much bigger. And people inside the sport were beginning to realize it. So what have we learned? Mona Kimura isn't dangerous because she's intimidating. She's dangerous because she's deceptive. Everything about her appearance encourages opponents to underestimate her. And every time they do, they pay for it. The smile is real. The kindness is real. The humility is real. But so is the violence. So is the precision. So is the ability to systematically dismantle elite fighters. That's why her rise feels different. She's not becoming famous because of trash talk. She's not becoming famous because of controversy. She's becoming famous because people can't stop watching the contrast, the innocent face, the devastating results, the sweet personality, the brutal performances. And right now, very few fighters seem capable of stopping it. The scary part? She's still improving, still evolving, still learning, which means the version we're watching today might not even be the best version of Mona Kimura. And if that's true, the rest of women's kickboxing may have a serious problem. Now I want your answer. Is Mona Kimura currently the most dangerous striker in women's kickboxing? Yes or no? Leave your opinion in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the next chapter of Mona Kimura's story might be even more terrifying than the last. And trust me, you won't want to miss it.